Hey everyone, it's Diana from Adventures with Art, and today we are talking about the color settings within the adjustments panel of Procreate. So, this is a really great way to adjust the overall color scheme of your designs really quickly without having to recreate anything or repaint anything. So, specifically, we're going to be talking about the first four settings here in the adjustments panel, all the way down to the gradient map. But before we get started, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, keep coming back to Adventures with Art for more art tips. So, like I said, we're only going to be dealing with the four settings here at the top. It's more than enough settings to, have the power to adjust your colors. The reason why we're not diving into the other ones is because they're not settings that have a direct impact on your colors. They may indirectly affect your colors, but that's not the main point of them. So if you're really looking to specifically change your colors, you're going to want to use these first four up here at the top. So a couple things we want to keep in mind before we start playing around with the colors. So as you'll notice, it is going to change all of the colors here on my screen. I did some nice rainbow squiggles so we can get at the whole spectrum of colors and how they're influenced by these settings. But if you look, I have all of these in one layer. You can only do a wide sweeping change of your colors to one layer. So if you have a design that has tons of layers in it, you're only going to be able to change the colors one layer at a time. So I'm usually not a huge fan of merging all your layers because if you have, a layer that you're going to want to go back and change at some point, it's harder to do if it's all in one layer and smushed together. But if you're done with your piece and you're wanting to play around with colors, this might be a good reason to do it, just so that you can change the colors of everything all at once. And the opposite is also true as well. So if you want to be changing the colors of your design, but there are certain pieces that you don't want to influence the colors of, it's worth it to put it on a different layer. That way you will not be changing the colors of those elements while you'll change the colors of the layer you have selected, if that makes sense. So again, know that you can only change the colors of one layer at a time. The other thing to note is that Procreate, you can undo things, right, until you close Procreate or until you go back to the gallery. So these are going to be some pretty significant changes that we're talking about here with our colors. And so let's say you're playing around with the color palettes and you pick one, but then you have to go run and do something and you end up closing Procreate or you go back to the gallery. Well, you can't undo it at that point. So I think it's important to make a copy of your design before you start messing around with the colors. That way you have an original in case something goes wrong and you need the original to revert back to, or at least know you have enough time in order to really sit down and mess around with your colors without needing to get up and leave and unfortunately saving something permanently that you weren't intending to. So those are just some warnings, some things we need to keep in mind before we play around with our colors. But now that I've said all that, let's jump in. So we're going to open our adjustments panel. The first thing we're going to look at is hue, saturation, and brightness. And to begin with, we're going to look at the layer. All right, so as you can see, this brings up a slider panel down at the bottom. What we're gonna look at is hue. So this is going to influence the hue, again, of everything on the entire layer. So as you can see, as I move it back and forth, whatever color is being highlighted by the slider is influencing the colors on my design. So, and another caveat, Procreate's color settings are very much technical and they're based on color theory and they're amazing for that reason. It's a lot to know and it's a lot to dive into, and you don't need to understand everything behind the technicalities of that in order to play around with colors and find something that feels good to you as an artist, right? So we're not going to dive into why changing the hue has an effect on certain colors in certain ways, right? We're just going to talk about how you can use these settings to then manipulate your art and find colors that you like. So I just want to make that clear that there is a lot of technical stuff going on behind the scenes, but that's not what we're dealing with right now. So that's hue. That's a great way to just change your colors pretty dramatically, pretty quickly. All right, now we're going to go to saturation. Saturation deals with how vibrant your colors are. So if you want your colors to be really vibrant, you can head over to max, and that's going to be the brightest your colors are going to be. If you have no saturation, you're ending up with a grayscale black and white design, which actually looks kind of cool. But in that case, there's no need to play around with color if you're going for that. So you find something that looks good to you. Brightness, that's going to affect how light or dark your colors are. So if we head over to max brightness, basically have no lines on there anymore at all. And if we head over to no brightness, we're back to our black and white design. So, sometimes if you want to increase it a little bit to have a little bit more washed out feel, a little bit darker for have a little bit more muted feel, whatever feels right to you in those settings. All right. So when you're happy with this, you can still undo it. But like, let's say you're playing around with this and you're happy, just click on the pencil again and that will save it. But as you'll see, we're going to revert back to the original, and that will just go back to what I had before. So it only wouldn't have done that if I had closed Procreate or gone back to the gallery. So you still can undo it at that point. All right, so let's go back into hue, saturation, and brightness. And now I'm going to show you what the pencil does. So basically, this is the same idea, except it's not going to affect your entire layer. So I'm just going to color over here, increase my brush settings. As you can see, I'm only coloring within the layer, and I'm affecting the colors within each color, right? So this can just be a really neat way to add highlights, shadows, and then adjust the colors of them. So since I then just did that with my pencil, once I'm in that pencil setting, I can now adjust the hue just like this. And as you can see, just the lines I just scribbled are being changed. And that's true of the saturation, the brightness, all that good stuff. So again, that's really great for highlights and shadows. Any other creative ideas you might have. So let's go back to the original here. All right, so that is hue, saturation, and brightness. Now let's look at color balance. So we're not going to dig into the pencil option anymore. It basically just does the same thing that I just described, but within each category. So just know that the layer option is always going to affect the entire layer, or where the pencil option is only going to affect what you're actually drawing at that time over that current layer. So just to keep that in mind, we're only going to dive into the layer option just so we can see more holistically what every setting does. So color balance, layer. Before you start messing around with the sliders, it's important to click on this sun over here, and you are going to want to choose your shadows, midtones, and highlights. So this can get a little bit more technical, but to give you a rough idea, your midtones are kind of your in between your lights and your darks. Your shadows are going to be your darker colors, and your highlights are going to be your lighter parts of your colors. So we're going to use midtones for this example, just to show you how this works. And as you can see, you have 3 different sliders. And as you can see, depending on what color is, what colors I have on my screen, those are the ones that get adjusted. So this is a little bit more precise than the hue, saturation, and brightness setting that we just talked about. So this is a really great option if you are looking for a little more nuance in how you change your colors. And also, again, to have this ability to change your midtones, your highlights, and your shadows all individually. This can just be a really great option to give you a little bit more of that control. So that is our color balance setting. Next, we are going to go to curves. So curves are talking about your reds, your greens, and your blues. When you pick gamma, that's going to influence changing your reds, your greens, and your blues, all 3 of them together at once. And what you're going to do is you're going to use this curve. So you're just going to drag this dot around, trying to find where you like those colors the most. All right. So that's your gamma setting. If I go into red, it's just going to affect the red tones that are in my design. And if I click on the green, it's just going to affect the green tones in my design. So that can be really helpful if you're looking to just influence one specific color. Here's the blue. It just gives you a way to be a little more precise with which color you're manipulating without just whitewashing the entire thing with different colors. So that's the curves. It's also really fun to use. So that's a fun one to play around with. Okay, let's go back to the original. Last one, gradient map. So again, we're going to click the layer. This one is really fun. So basically, you can pick different pre-made gradients out of the library. And you can just see how those all have an impact on your design. What I love about the pre-made ones is that um, they are designed to be beautiful, right? Like Procreate made them, constructed them, and put them together so that they look really nice. And so it can be a really easy way to just put on a new color scheme onto your design without having to worry about whether it's going to be cohesive or it's going to, fit together. If you are creative and you want to try making your own gradient library, you can do that by clicking the plus button and creating your own gradients. So that's an option as well. All right, that is Procreate color settings. I hope that was helpful. Again, there's a lot of technicalities that go along with this, but when you're just getting started, or if you're not interested in all of the technical reasons as to how and why color works, you can just play around with them, and it's still going to give you a lot of freedom and a lot of creativity for playing around with colors in your design. Again, remember to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and I will see you next time at Adventures with Art. So lastly, let's talk about gradient maps. This is really neat because it lets you just put on a new color palette on your design that have been pre-created, carefully chosen by the great professionals at Procreate. So as you can see, they have a number that you can choose from. And this just makes it stress-free, easy to just, you know what, I like this color palette. It looks good, lay it on top of my design. You can just go ahead and create, pick one of these, right? If you're feeling creative, you can also create your own. So what you can do is you just click the plus. What you can do is then lay down different gradient points, and then you can just pick what colors you want those to be. I'm not, this would take a little more effort than I'm currently exerting right now, but just create some neat gradients here that you can then customize and really can add some of your own personal touch to your work. So that's also a great option too, is if you're really feeling inspired to create your own gradients, you can do that as well. And then you have that here to use, from design to design. It will save to your gradient library for you to use in the future. If you really enjoyed learning about colors and you want to learn more about colors, if you want to learn more about colors and you really enjoyed learning about colors, there's actually a Skillshare class that I really highly suggest about color palettes that you can take. I'll put it down in the show notes. It goes really in depth in how to pick the right colors for you and for your design. It's a lot more in depth about how colors really work together for your art. So with my link, you can get a free trial and take that class for free. All right, I hope this was helpful. Please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you again at Adventures with Art.